Warm welcome everyone to our virtual meetup series Confab episode 3. We have registrations from 4 different continents interesting to learn about blockchain for smart cities. Smart cities are one of the focus areas of many governments across the globe. Many countries have created strategies for transforming their cities into smart cities in order to fully utilize the potential opportunities arising from the urbanization. Blockchain, we all know, is poised to revolutionize the how we perform any kind of transaction and will impact everyone's banking, power, education, healthcare, and some of the other sectors as well. The public sector is no expectation. The government and the public sector have pressing need for complete, secure, authentic, and trustworthy information exchange across various other fields. Blockchain technology is emerging as tool for governments around the world to define the framework under which information can be used for transactional purposes. Today we have Dr. Stefan to share his insights and also educate us how smart cities and blockchain can be a great combination for an upcoming technology advancements, and how our cities can come into become really intelligent so that we do not have to suffer from the problems of drainage, traffic, and other concurring issues. So over to you, Dr. Stefan. We look forward for your session.
Okay, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very excited to talk to all of you. And this presentation is about blockchain for smart cities. I was asked to do a very brief, short introduction to blockchain if there was any participant who was not perfectly familiar with what blockchain technology is. So I just spent 1 minute explaining why blockchain is important and what it is. And then we will move into a description of smart cities, the different areas of smart cities, how we can define a smart city. And then we will move over to what's probably the most interesting part, which would be the use cases for public administration using blockchain and other sort of services within the city that can be public-private collaboration and so on related to blockchain and smart cities. And finally, just some conclusions and then open up for a discussion. Okay, so let's see if you can see the presentation. I like to start with why blockchain is important. You all know that blockchain is a distributed technology, and that traditional we have been supported by central entities to establish trust between actors, but that blockchain now offers an opportunity to set up a distributed technology where we don't need that central entity anymore and rely upon their services and so on. So we can handle directly person to person throughout the world. The second important part is that blockchain can be totally transparent, and that's also very important for the public administration, and the possibility for the cities to show data, financial data, also other kind of data related to environment, IoT, and so on. And third, that blockchain is a very secure technology. I guess you all have an idea of what blockchain is, and then just move over to the second page and what I think maybe is the basis of the solution, where blockchain is a P2P computer distributed network, where every computer, as you can see in the figure below, shows a blockchain architecture with a distributed peer-to-peer computer network in which interconnected nodes share resources among each others and use a centralized administrative system and a shared version of blockchain. And actually, this technology is called blockchain because of what we can see in the upper figure. It's a chain of blocks where each block has the information of the block before, and then when we make a new registry within the block, we use the mathematical process and so on, and to generate a new block, which is sent to the network and then added within the different blockchains. So it's actually a chain of blocks. Okay, let's move over to the next one. And this is just a figure of what we can find in internet, how this works. And I think we could leave this for future discussion and move into what I think is more interesting things. I think that for public administration, there are actually two very important parts. With first, what's offered with the traditional distributed ledger technologies, which is just a registry of information, for example, accounting and other kind of public information that can be published on blockchain, and in that way be transparent and avoid aspects as corruption and so on. And the second aspect, of course, is the use of the smart contracts to automatically provide services to the citizens. And I think this slide is also important because when we talk about blockchain for public administration, many times it is important to use what are called these private blockchains. I know, like countries like Estonia and so on, they actually use private blockchains because it's a security issue that for them it's important that other countries can't access their network and their nodes and so on. So many people favor in the open discussion the public blockchains, but I think it's important to have in mind the role that the private blockchains probably have to play when we talk about services for that smart cities provide. For example, the European Union has a very, very strong new law about personal data and so on, and would not allow public administrations to store data without the borders of their own country. So we should have that in mind when we talk about smart cities. And just to repeat, distributed, transparent, and secure systems, which is the sort of the core for blockchain. And where to use blockchain? Blockchain has special advantage when we speak about services and where there is actually not trust established between the parties, or there is low trust, which is definitely the case in the smart cities. With them in many countries, we actually don't trust our administration in many cases. There is corruption, and they use the data in ways that they should not use our personal data. It's also important that the data is immutable, and that's the case in the public administration. Of course, the politicians should not be able to go in and change historical data, which is really important for the citizen, that it's a true and established and guaranteed data. And there's a need for cybersecurity in the smart cities. We know, for example, Estonia, again, they actually started to build their blockchain administration due to a cybersecurity problem with the foreign countries. And there's fourth one is the need for transparency in data. I think the transparency in data together with the big data for smart cities is really, really important. Many cities today share data, open data, but this could be so much better if it was on a blockchain and we could really, really trust and have transparent access to this data. And it's also, of course, valuable with a decentralized information and also for automated processes. We know that public administration can be very, very heavy, very slow in many times, and automate some of the processes within the smart cities could really benefit the citizens, which is actually the reason why the administration exists. And there's a lot of hype, a lot of competition between what's the smartest cities in the world and the smartest cities in the country and so on. I don't really think that it is important. I think it's important to create services that is of value for the end users. And I think the best smart cities solution many times are much more close to the users than these kind of fully automated AI based services that some cities offers in the world. And I also think there's a very, very big difference between what kind of problems each city has. It's obvious that the cities today, we have a lot of new problems because the traditionally, like we can see in the left part of this slide, city platforms, traditionally cities, of course, for the last 20-25 years have been adding digitalization of their information, of their processes, like every private company also have. But the problem in the cities with the current situation is that there is a lot of data, a lot of automation in each area. What these are called silos, like separated from each other. Transport and mobility, for example, building management, water and energy, security, and so on. They're in many cases highly automated and highly digitalized, but they don't share information between each other. So smart cities is not actually only adding technology and using technology for the control and the management and the services in the city. It's also a question about sharing information between these different areas and create new and better services for the citizens. So how do we do that? Well, on the right part of this slide, you can see what's called a smart city platform. And smart city platforms have been used for 10, 15 years, and they're actually a common way to manage cities. The problem, though, is that many of these platforms built by private companies, big IT companies, they are often, they have problem with integration with external services. They are centralized, so they are closed. They are very little transparent, and so on. So here could be very interesting to build these smart city platforms upon blockchain that would actually add transparency, add possibilities for new services and so on to be built, and of course enhance open source and so on, which I think that everybody is here today we are in favor of that kind of ideas. And what is a smart city? Well, I think every smart city can define themselves and should try to define themselves. It's interesting to see, of course, that it's a smart city should, of course, use technology, but maybe not. Maybe it's not necessary to use the very most sophisticated technology in every case. I think it's very important to build a smart city from the citizens' needs. So depending upon where the city is located, what problems they have, what opportunities they have, what history, what their incomes come from, the smart city solutions should be different and adapted and developed from that city. And we can see, but traditionally, or many people want to group some areas around the smart city. So just to be able to structure this, we talk about, of course, smart government, which is making it transparent, using ICT, offering good services, smart living for the citizens, safe, healthy. Smart mobility is a huge challenge today for many cities. Mixed modal access, integrated ICT, and so on. We see now also self-driving cars and all these trends, but it is really, really important for many cities to solve the mobility problem. We have the smart people, which has to do with education, lifelong learning, and increase creativity and give access for people to learn and develop and have a good life. We have the economical part, which is really important today. Cities have to attract talent, they have to attract companies, they have to attract investments to be competitive. And of course, maybe the biggest challenge of them all is the environmental issue, where cities have to take care of and huge climate problems with air qualities, with recycling, with bringing in more animals, more water, better water, and so on. So there are big challenges within the environment also. There are thousands of use cases related to the cities, as it's such a wide aspect. We will look into some of these. We will start with the idea that the blockchain could also be a part of the public administration. Many services, public services could, and I believe personally should be based upon blockchain or similar digital ledger technologies, because the city is property of all of us, and having transparent information and access to share data, I think it's a citizen's right. And for example, we're going to look at some use cases now. Some very tied to the traditional public administration, and some more related that could also be provided from third parties. I think in the electronic administration and e-government, the best example that we all know about is the country Estonia, that has their whole public administration practically built upon blockchain since 2013 and continuously developing new services. So that's a fantastic example. They have a good web page where you can dive into and search by yourself also. We have also other countries and other cities that are working hard to become blockchain references and use blockchain technology. As for example, Dubai, they want all the public administration and paperwork to be on blockchain and the year 2020. Another part of this, very important for the public administration and democracy, is the voting. Voting has become sort of a trigger for many cities to start using blockchain. And a couple of weeks ago, we could see that on the left news side, you can see here that West Virginia was the first company in the US to permit voting, especially for people that were not able to do it locally. They could vote remotely. And also there have been a lot of trials, like this on the right side is in Zug in Switzerland, but we have seen in Congo and so on. And I think voting is a high value proposition for blockchain. Another thing, very interesting aspect is land and real estate registry. There are a lot of projects going on. On the left side, you can see one from my home country, Sweden, where there's a big project about land registry on blockchain, and the value, added value that this generates, both concerning trust, concerning speed, concerning access and transparency to actually who owns the land, and the immutability and the guarantee that this is not manipulated. We have seen many cases throughout the years where in war zones and so on, after the war, it has been very difficult to claim properties and so on for people. So this would actually guarantee this the properties and so on, and even in times of war or problem or massive movement of people. On the right side, it's just another example from Africa, where Ghana, there's a Ghana project where land is registered with blockchain. Another Yeah, we got some sound from somebody here. Okay, another aspect that really is related to the public service and public administration is, I think we should maybe mute the person who has come in here. It's a bit difficult. Okay, so that's better. Thank you. I'm sorry. I think I should go back one step. I don't really know how to do that. I can hear. Medical records, for example, it's very important that these medical records can be on blockchain, because it makes us be able to bring this medical record with us, and makes this medical record private, and only with access for doctors, public administration, which really should be able to look at this, and where we also can see on our own medical record who has been looking on that medical record, who has been writing the data, and so on. Another case, just on the right side here, it's in Estonia also. Every individual owns their own medical record on blockchain, and they can see every time a doctor or public administration have gone in and looked into their medical record, and actually what they have looked on. And if anybody looks at something they don't have actually explicit permission, they will have legal problems. Another interesting thing is the building and public, the register of the space, actually. And there's a lot of technology now developed for a digitalization of our spaces, of our environment in space. And BIM, which is a building integrated modeling technology, is moving moving to blockchain in many pilots, and that's, I think, really interesting, because this is a part of also the public administration's buildings, so we can actually have transparent data and know what's going on within these kind of buildings, and it's a value also for the citizens for the transparency issue. We have urban planning also, it's a geospatial systems like GIS and so on. It's very important to actually track and have control of the land, and blockchain based land registration and geospatial blockchain is very important. We can actually have proof of spatial movement and so on. So it's a very interesting, as urban planning is a responsibility of the public administration. Energy is a huge issue. There's a lot of projects, maybe one of the biggest areas where most blockchain projects are developed and implemented. Most of you know about the Brooklyn microgrid. There was, I think it's from 2016, where the neighbors generate and consume energy in a blockchain network within the neighborhood. There's a lot of these kind of projects going on right now. I know about them in Australia. I think there's one in Bangkok. There is in the US, it's a huge number, and so on, and in England also. So it's a very interesting thing, and also a symbol of the huge transformation of the energy sector that's moving from the traditional generation and transport and consumption of energy to a model where the smart grid, the smart electrical network is full of places for distributed generation, auto consumption, and so on. Supply chain is a core functionality that is used for using blockchain. The Walmart information a couple of weeks ago that everybody that were supplying salad and other greengrocers to Walmart would have to adapt their blockchain solution to during the latest year of 2019. I think that's a game changer, and it's providing huge value also for the end user, the supply chain use of blockchain. On the right side, we can see just an example of how a user could actually see how coffee is produced in South America, in Peru in this case, and transported, I think, to China with the diff on the very right side. with the different certificates, the different processes that these projects are going through during the life cycle and the supply chain. Mobility, as we talked about, is one enormous problem for many cities, and blockchain is being used as an alternative and as a complement for many of these kind of services, trying also to compete with services like Uber and so on, to make it actually real distributed network of drivers and mobility services. And finally, just a reflection over this kind of when public administration, especially cities, use blockchain and want to use blockchain. There's a lot of pilots going on, and companies together with the public administration are trying and developing these kind of services. I personally believe that if the best way to date for the public administration to start with blockchain projects, I think they should be careful and really think about what kind of projects they should choose, because if this is a model about, on the left side we can see the public services, and on the right side we can see the end users, we see that there's a lot of new aspects introduced to the public administration that they are actually not used to handle, like the dApps, the tokens, the digital wallets, handling of the private user data, digital IDs, etc. So I think this kind of services, this is an illustration with a highlighted part. If you develop services like voting or complex services, you actually have to use all these kind of new parts that makes it projects for the public administration, which actually depends on that everybody can participate, that there's a digital ID, there's the people have access to the computers, mobile phones, etc. It should be very, very thought through before starting complex projects. I think if you can see just an example of this could be a complex app or some kind of voting or some kind of public services, medical records, and so on. These are very, very heavy and tough projects. Another kind of projects like that would only include, for example, the dApp, open data, and a user face could be, for example, the public registration of their economy, or it could be the registration of simple data like, for example, the air temperature or some kind of IoT data that is collected and showed on a public database through blockchain, and not necessarily starting with complex projects that include, say, user interaction and so on. So, like a conclusion, smart cities, they aim to make cities more sustainable, secure, and so on. And that blockchain systems, they bring very, very high value aspects to this kind of to the cities, like trust, transparency, and security, just to fight what's it called, the corruption, and to make cities more transparent and so on. And I think there are huge opportunities to develop and integrate public services based upon blockchain. But not only public, we could see also that these kind of semi-public services, we could see private-public collaboration. So I think to develop and integrate services that are private, but sort of are aimed to serve the big audience are also very interesting. And this is the short presentation I wanted to share with you, and I hope you have a little better idea what smart cities are and how blockchain can help smart cities and what the opportunities could be.
Thank you, Dr. Stefan. If we can move on to the questions now, can I ask you some questions which we received from the members of the audience?
Yeah, yes, please, of course. And to me, it's fine if anybody also want to comment, or the participants. I would be very happy to have an open dialogue if you think it's okay.
Yes, that's welcome too. And if anybody's listening and if you would like to ask a question, please type in the chat box. We'll pick it up from there. So the first question, Dr. Stefan, is somebody who likes to know about the top 3 smart city implementations on blockchain. How many users are using each of these applications? Is there a data about how many users are using? Possibly Estonia?
Yeah, Estonia. Yeah, Estonia has a very good data because everybody in Estonia. Estonia is a small country. I think they have about 2 million citizens, the whole country. So it's a country that actually everybody who wants to use the public services is using blockchain. So for things like public administration, your digital ID, for example, is a blockchain ID, and in Estonia, so the digital ID use based upon blockchain in Estonia, there are 2 millions, and the same with the medical records and also any kind practically kind of service in Estonia is blockchain based, and there should be about 2 million users because there is no other way to access these kind of services in Estonia because they took that decision. And they developed also, I think that's a good lesson to learn. They did a lot of work with the citizens. They, of course, were aware that old people that lived in remote places would have more difficulties to access these services, but they thought that they had to do this 100%. They had to do it all in. So they actually parallel to develop their blockchain-based digital ID and so on. They developed a broadband access for actually every citizen within the borders of Estonia. And other countries, the blockchain services, I can't actually, we can see from the numbers of the like voting experiments and so on. But I think those data are not as reliable as for example, the blockchain data in Estonia.
Interesting. And beyond blockchain, what are the critical enabling technologies that can make cities smarter, more resilient? What precursors to blockchain, what follow-on applications are enabled beyond blockchain?
Yeah. Well, I think one very important issue is the IoT data that actually, or actually the data itself, to collect and structure data. I think that's a huge or let's say it's extremely important because we need data to make smart decisions, and a lot of countries are working with data, but I think they're working with data. They have the data and they store the data and they share the data, but they share it and store it in the wrong way. So I think this collection, storage, and sharing of data is a top 3 critical issue if you want to make a city smart. I think also it depends on each city, of course. As well, like I said in the beginning, we can see in this slide, for example, that I was in Medellin in Colombia, South America last week, to speak about smart cities. And for them, the smartest solutions are not the most technological, although they work with a lot of big data. But these are, for example, this mobility service that is helping people that live on these sides of the hills to move and participate activity in the city. So I think mobility is actually a huge and the most important public service or what they have to control within most of the cities, because people spend too much time within moving from one place to another. And of course, the very most important is the telecom infrastructure. I think it's easy to forget. We take it for granted many times, but as soon as we have problem with the telecom and we don't have bandwidth and so on, I think that's also a huge, maybe the most important. So I would say good telecom infrastructure, mobility, and also, of course, the data.
Interesting. You mentioned bandwidth, Dr. Stefan. How about how do countries with telecom infrastructure challenges move ahead in the present circumstance? Is it a prerequisite that they implement the telecom infrastructure first and then try and move into smart cities, or is there any other way?
Well, I think to be a smart city, you need telecom infrastructure. It's absolutely necessary. You need to be able to give people access to use their mobile phones, to access services and so on. So I would say you can't develop a smart city without developing a good ICT infrastructure for telecom and communication. I think that's actually it's impossible. But on the other side, I would also say that I don't think really it's only the challenge of the cities to build a good infrastructure. I think many times where there's free competition and so on, the big telecom companies, they build a good infrastructure for the cities because there are a lot of users and so on. But we forget many times the other areas of our countries where sometimes they don't even have access to the internet and so on, or can't even make a phone call with their mobile phones. So I think, and that's actually a very big part of the problems that are generated in the cities today, because people move away from parts where they have a good life, but they can't live there because they don't have any access to the internet. They can't make phone calls and so on. So they move away from places where they could perfectly live, where they want to live because their families live there. They come there from there, but they have to move into the cities because they can't work where they can't make a living if they don't have telecom. And I think that's very many times we forget about that. We build very smart cities, very efficient, but we forget about that one of the big problems with the mobility and so on, and the uncontrolled building and expansion of the cities, is that people moving into the cities that could actually make a good living if they could live where they live today. But we have to invest do the same investments where people were in less populated areas to make the whole country alive, to keep the whole country alive.
Yes, that's a good point of view. One more question is, how can an accountant or a taxation professional play a role in smart city development? Do you think different types of professionals have different roles to play?
Well, one of my favorite applications is the accountant application for the smart cities based upon blockchain. I think it's because it's actually so simple to build it. An open accounting system, transparent accounting system. I think that's the one of the easiest places to start if we want to fight corruption and so on. I mean, technological. It's politically it's not easy because the politicians have their own interests and so on. But I really think, yeah, of course, accounting, everything that it belongs to the cities today, where we need these kind of services and make those public. Also taxes, of course, both the collection and the spending of our taxes is really necessary to make transparent. We need to know that not exactly how much everybody pays, because maybe that's a privacy issue and what they pay for, but we need to know that the taxes that should be paid are paid, and we should need to know when they are paid. We will need to know that when we send an invoice to the public administration for a service that we have made, for example, if we're a service provider, that invoice is registered, the expected payment date and so on. Because today it's the lack of transparency. It's actually makes people suffer so much. So I think this kind of services that maybe not at first glint seems to be a blockchain or smart city issue. I think accountants and taxation professionals are a really key player in making a blockchain a reality as one of these, like I showed in the last slides, that we don't have to make the extremely complex apps and so on, just to make it transparent to start with. I think that's a very good starting point.
Cool. And do smart cities make people smart?
No, I don't think that maybe they make them smart, but then it should let them be smart. I mean, I think, of course, and also I think, I'm sorry, I regret that. I said yes. I really think that a smart city could make people smarter, because access to good learning platforms, digital learning platforms, e-learning, make people enjoy lifetime learning, let the kids that go to school from young age until university have a personally adapted digital education, where everybody can be forced to do their best and find it stimulating to be at school. I think that really makes people more intelligent. And I think the centralized and the standardized education today, I think I hope that within 10 or 15 years, we will really look back and say, how was it possible that everybody, just because they were born the same age, a year, had to learn or read and do the same exercises, when we know that people have different capacities, and that it should be, it's not just for the most talented people, it's also for the people that maybe don't read as fast as the other, maybe they're good at something, but they're not very good at mathematics. So let people learn in their own pace, and I think that would be extremely worth a lot. And I think also blockchain could play a big role in education. We could actually all our kind of achievements in studying achievements and so on could be blockchain based, be transparent, so we actually can get away from all these falsifications of certificates and masters and things that people have or have not done. So it's I think education is a big area for blockchain also.
Well, I think, yes, it comes down to the next question as well. What are the three fundamental drivers for implementation in third world countries, in developing countries, and countries with low investment and densely populated areas? I'm trying to combine two questions, but I think they're related to each other.
Yeah, you mean drivers behind the need for the development of smart cities, or?
The implementation in third world countries, where usually the investment is low and the population is quite dense.
And no, I really I think it's an extremely good question. I think it's very difficult actually to answer, because I think it's easy to say that a smart city has this and this and that. I think that we have to look at each city and the needs, specific needs, because I think in many cities it might be, for example, education, general education and access to education. That is the problem, but maybe the problem in that case is not that there are not money for the schools, but actually people can come to the school. Maybe we can use technology to bring education closer to where people live, like medical care. Also, I think it's really of course we need health, we need food distribution, we need all kind of basic needs. But once we have basic needs, I think the best investment is telecom infrastructure, because telecom infrastructure, it gives access and opens up the world to so many people, and it actually lets everybody compete on a more equal playground. So I would say that telecom definitely is one of the one, and also mobility is extremely important, and the third thing is, of course, a functional public administration without corruption and so on. And I think that blockchain can help a lot to make our public administration more transparent, so actually everybody can know where the money goes, what we spend the money, where we spend the money, where we got the money from. I think that would make everybody understand much better and would make us a more participative city. So I think that's a key issue also.
So can blockchain actually play a part in making the basic services affordable in a smart city? Do you think it can work or it can enhance the capability or enhance the deliverability of a smart city?
Yeah, I really think so. I think that because I think there's so many inefficient processes today in the cities, and that we make things in a way that maybe is not the best way because it's just a traditional way to do it. And I think we have to find new ways to do it. And I think we have to find more transparent. I think the more open a system is, more participative. And I think with blockchain as an open system to data, to big data, to open data, innovation for making almost any process in the cities more efficient today, it's obvious. So definitely, I think blockchain could be a big game changer.
And can public transportation industry be based on blockchain and work without a state or human intervention, cutting costs and providing better service delivery?
Well, if we believe, which I do, that we can make, for example, things like self-driving public transportation, buses, cars, and so on, I think definitely that blockchain as an information and shared database is very, very positive. Maybe the cars themselves won't use blockchain to drive because blockchain, as we know, is a slow technology at the moment. But I think a collection of data, for example, where vehicles move, if you can share that data and people can actually use that data to develop better and more efficient transportation and so on, I think blockchain is a good technology, and not maybe necessary. Maybe it's not the biggest area for implementation, but yes, it's a good way to use blockchain.
And how can an individual contribute towards building smart cities with blockchain? And possibly, is there a role for an individual as one single person to contribute towards building blockchain? So smart cities using blockchain?
Yeah, I really think so. I think if you're actually thinking about it, almost all initiatives and all ideas start with one person, or at least a discussion between a couple of persons. You see a problem, and to use the initiatives from many individuals today. I know that for example, the experiments that are done in public administration are very often driven by one person in the public administration or outside the public administration, approaching the public administration with ideas to solve, to do things, to test voting, to test transparency and so on using blockchain. So I think there's a role, and I think also finally we can't expect people around us to do things. We need to do things if we want to change things. I think we have to take initiatives, and I think it's a fantastic moment to take initiatives because still a very few people know about blockchain, and if we as individuals introduce this kind of technology, the solutions, the values that it provides to a city, I think there are huge opportunities. Yes, and they're really interesting, really important. It's a good question, but I really like that. Yeah.
Thank you. And let's say if I try and do it, are there any publicly available estimation tools available for me to estimate the cost so that I can probably design in a better way?
I have seen many of these pilots today. I think that's one of the biggest problems. I think, like just an example, when you are doing, for example, trying voting experiments on blockchain and so on, and I've seen some built on Ethereum, for example. Well, the problem is that actually the cost around building the solution is not big at all, but it's very, very difficult for the public administration because they don't know what it will cost. Because if you need to buy or pay in Ethereum to execute the voting and so on, you don't know what the cost will be in Ethereum when you start a project, especially not 1 year ago. And now it's a little more stable. But if you say that, oh, we want to make a pilot, we want to make a voting and in February this year or next year, we don't know what will it cost, because the cost issue is really important. So we don't know that. and that's really, really important. I think we have to find good alternatives with fixed costs for special services within blockchain also. So tools, I couldn't really. I'm not the best person to ask, but I think that's the problem. And if you want that person want to make a good estimation and sort of a budget or for this, you should look for some kind of solution with fixed price for these kind of services.
Yes, understandable. And what's your opinion on blockchain not being considered as research and development for fiscal incentives in the European context? It comes from a European audience.
Yeah. I was not aware of that it was not the case, but if it's the case, of course, it's a disaster, because I think it's one of the areas where most progressive and most experimental innovation is done today. And although I know that Europe really is pushing blockchain solutions and is working hard, I'm a member of the European Blockchain Observatory, and there's a lot of investments planned for hundreds of millions of euros planned for research and investment and research, investigation and development projects. So I think that's just a bad coordination. And I think I hope that this person that has asked this could be inform the parts that are doing this kind of regulation and try to create a debate about this, because that's not logic.
Very true. And one question from an audience in Africa. Most development projects in Africa and emerging markets are funded by the East, possibly from China and elsewhere, Japan, possibly. And there is a limit on the nature and scope of work. How can third world countries easily adopt concepts of smart cities amidst current infrastructural developments? I think it comes from a perspective of not having the right infrastructure yet, but wanting to do it.
Yeah. What from my perspective, just a reflection, and not maybe the best one, but I think, or I'm aware of that. Of course, in many countries in Africa, without what we, for example, in Europe, take as granted as a backbone infrastructure that should be in place. I mean, railroads, airports, telecommunications, working telecommunications, and so on, water, energy, so on. They are many times finding new ways to develop these kind of smart solutions. I mean, if you're starting from scratch today in a city and want to build that telecom infrastructure, maybe there's a more economical way to start with wireless solutions than to start with digging cables in the ground, because that's finally very expensive. So yeah, it's difficult. I could not really. I wish I could answer that question, but I don't really feel that I have knowledge enough.
And the last question, Dr. Stefan, is what role solid waste management will play in making a city clean in a smart city context? Solid waste management.
I think that's a key issue. We are definitely moving towards a circular economy. And I actually had a slide about the circular economy, but I took it away because I thought I had so many slides, because I was just also as a blockchain issue, because I think blockchain and the registry, like as well as the supply chain, to be able to track materials, pieces, different kind of also like workforce, social impacts and so on of products throughout the life cycle is extremely important. And I think there's a huge space for blockchain to do that service, because it has also actually all the components. It's transparent and so on. And of course, recycling waste is a key issue, and blockchain could be a really help to track to guarantee that that kind of solid waste management is also controlled throughout the life cycle and with blockchain technology. So it's a very interesting question. I really think we have to take that in have that in mind when we talk about circular economy.
Toxic waste management is also, I mean, toxic dumping was a big issue some many months ago.
Yeah.
So I think it has relevance within the smart city and from the blockchain context. Just the last bit, Dr. Stefan, before we round it off, I would like to share a screen of mine from Google Trends about smart cities. I just typed in smart cities and that let me try if I can make it here, if I can do it.
Should I stop sharing mine maybe?
No, I think I would have it right now.
Oh, here it comes. Yeah.
So what do you make of it? I mean, at first glance, what do you think of this? What are your opinions? I just typed in smart cities for Google Trends and out comes the screen.
Are these searches or?
Yeah, these are the Google Trends searches across the globe in the last 12 months, worldwide. I think most of, there's a lot of interest from Asia, if you can look at the top 5 countries.
Yeah.
And there's a fair bit of interest in Europe and North Africa as well.
Yeah.
And
I can see Spain is I live in Spain, I'm from Sweden, but I live in Spain is also rather dark.
Yes, it's rather dark as well.
Yeah. No, yeah, it's I think it's interesting. I have the same feeling. I also can see that if you compare, for example, Africa and South America, South America is really into smart city solutions. Asia is India especially, and Australia. But Asia, I think it's so much information about Asia, so many things, or India, and so many things going on. So excited to hear about all this. So, and I thought so. Maybe it's significant for the problems that appears with a high population, a lot of like basic solutions. Maybe smart cities could be a way to solve many problems that have have not been solved by traditional administration until today, because we can look at the traditional administration. Okay, there is medical care, there's some sort of public services with water, electricity, and so on, but it's not really functioning very well in many parts of the world. And I think blockchain, the main thing that they would bring into these kind of into the public administration in general is transparency. I think it's so important to make everybody actually aware, show where our money goes, where we invest the money, and discuss openly about where should the money be invested, because money is limited, and maybe these smart city technologies in many cases can help to make a better living for the people, which should be the aim of the public administration. And that's what I find about this screen. But it's really interesting. India is and all the kind of Asian countries is many top countries. So it's fantastic, because I think that it's really is a kind of solution that can be used to make a better living for everybody.
Well, thanks for your comments and opinions and your time and your insights into blockchain for smart cities, Dr. Stefan. It's been a fantastic pleasure and a privilege to be your host today, and to the audience. I hope we do have some more questions coming in. I will pass on to you offline, and we'll have a report up and ready within a week with everything packaged in.
Fantastic, and thank you very much for the opportunity. It's been a pleasure, and anything you want, I'm here for questions, discussions, and ideas. And thank you very much for the initiative, and good luck.
Thank you, Dr. Stefan. And if anybody would like to contact Dr. Stefan, we will share his profiles and social media accounts, so you can contact him directly later on. Thank you, Dr. Stefan. Thank you, audience, and we'll keep in touch again.
Thanks.